Hello and welcome to our career interview with Miss Christina Arangio. Joining me today for this interview is Greenville High School student Adler Carl. So Ms. Arangio, if we can get started, can you tell us what your profession is and a little bit about the journey of how you've gotten to where you are today?
Well, I'm an anchor reporter for News10 ABC in Albany, New York, and I am currently a morning noon anchor. I've been with the station for about, 13 plus years. I have actually been at 6 different stations. I went to Ithaca College. I studied broadcast journalism with communications with a concentration in broadcast journalism. And I had 2 internships during my college experience, which were invaluable. One was at News 12 Long Island on the local level. One was at NBC News in New York. And those internships were phenomenal in helping me prepare, being able to get out in the field, see what other reporters do. I've always had an interest in reporting. And, I ended up here.
Awesome. So what does a typical day look like for you? What does it involve?
Well, my day starts really early, 2:30 in the morning, because I'm a morning anchor. So when I get up, the first thing I'm doing, we're all tied to our smartphones. So, one of the first things I'm doing is checking headlines, checking newspapers, checking big stories that I may have missed while I was sleeping. I'm checking with my producers to make sure if there's anything big coming up that I didn't see that happened locally, I can get the scoop on that before I hit the station. And then I'll even flip around to the 24-hour, news channels while I'm having a cup of coffee in the morning just to make sure I'm up to speed. And then I hit the door running. I mean, I'm on the air at 4:30 in the morning and I'm on until 9 a.m. and that's live the whole time. So when I hit the door in COVID times, I used to go into the newsroom and work there a little bit. But now, as everybody's just trying to maintain different spaces, I go straight into the studio. We have iPads, so I can see my scripts right there in front of me. And at this point, I am basically just trying to stay a couple of what we call blocks ahead of myself so that if I see changes that need to be made, because I'm very much a copy editor, I'm making those changes that I can do right on my iPad. So I'll make changes. I'll talk with the producers. If there's a concern with content, even things, grammar, things like that, I'm constantly communicating with our producers who are also our writers. But I'm a writer too. And so I'll make those changes if necessary. And we may have, live interviews during the show, if it's the lead up to the Super Bowl, right before the inauguration, checking in with reporters on, where they are and what's big news to everybody and chatting with them. So I may even be, on my phone in commercial breaks, looking up a couple of things, a couple of articles so that I make sure I'm up to speed with what I want to ask these reporters. So that's until 9 a.m. And then I'm right into the noon. I'm either preparing actually content for the morning show the next day, or I'm already starting to write for the noon, talk with the producers about what we're doing at noon. I end up writing more for noon than I do for the morning show just because I have more time there. And a lot of times I'm working on a segment that we do every week called Women's Health Wednesday. So a lot of times I'm doing Zoom interviews right now instead of going out because of COVID. And I'm getting ready for, the topic of the week. This week it's colorectal cancer because it's Colorectal Cancer Awareness Month. So it's go, go, go. I'll work on the next morning show and some segments, and then I'm back into reading for the hour-long noon newscast. And then I tape a tease before the noon, and I tape something right after the noon for the next day's morning show. So it's busy. It's really busy, but I love being busy, and I prefer it any day.
What do you love most about your job?
I think for me, it's helping people. I mean, that's the reason I got into this. And it is a public service. We're always trying to keep people informed. And in these times of the pandemic, my goodness, there's been such a need for that, right? I mean, where are the testing sites? How are the vaccines moving along and all the, the struggles we had moving that along. But now finally we're getting into a better pace. Or even if there was a major car accident, so 3 roads are closed and people are trying to get to school and to work in the morning, and so parents need to know. And even though the stories can be so tough, one of the things that I love, Adler, is there always comes the bright spot after, how people come together. I mean, even if you want to look at the pandemic, I know I keep using that example because it has consumed the news lately, but after any tragedy or any difficult thing, so often after that, the community comes together and helps in some way. So it gives me a lot of faith in humanity a lot of people will say, gosh, how do you do that job? It's so negative all the time. But I honestly feel that for all the negatives, there are so many more positives out there. And the other part of it is being a morning anchor, you're kind of getting people started with their day. And so I like getting people started on the right foot, and you can have some lighter stories in the morning. We do some positive stories in a segment I came up with called Giving on 10, where we talk about how people are giving back to the community. It's a daily segment now. So we try to give them positive things too. So that's a couple of things that I like about the job.
Do you think an important aspect of the job is also, after those really sad and tragic stories, you go yourself or any of your team members and you go and check up on that family, even if it's not going to be aired, you just kind of see and check up?
That's a really good point. A lot of times what we've been doing now is through email and Facebook Messenger. So often we'll have a story, and then there may be some reason for a follow-up, or they may reach out to us because there's an update on the story. And so I do feel like we follow up more now, where we have everything at our fingertips so much more easily. And I think that's a great point. It's something that we don't do enough of in general, but I'm noticing that it's happening more often, especially as people are trying to get these vaccine appointments. I can't tell you how many people reached out. Oh, I've been trying so long, I can't get a hold of anybody. And then you feel compelled to help. Oh, okay, I just found out about this. Or the greatest thing is when I can pass along something to somebody and then they reach back out to me and say, thank you so much, I was able to get this done. So yeah, that's a great thing about the job.
Also, what kind of skills do you need for like that type of job, such as like soft skills like communications, problem solving, and teamwork?
Yeah.
Or do you need more of like trainable skills that you would go to school for?
It's definitely both. I mean, communication is so key, and leadership skills, especially as a morning anchor. I'm kind of a leader of the team, and I'm doing a lot of coaching with that team. So if our reporters are out on a story and there's something where I feel it could be an accuracy thing, it could be that there's the balance isn't there, which is a problem that we see a lot, that I'm constantly on everyone about making sure that they're being balanced, even if it's from a performance perspective. I'm texting our reporters in the field whenever I see something, and it's good for them too, but you have to be able to pass along constructive criticism in a respectful, approachable way, so people want to do better, but also they don't feel intimidated and they learn from it. I want them to learn from it. One of the best things people can tell me is, oh gosh, you really helped me with that. I feel like the product or my story was a lot better. And then with my producers, just there in the studio, I could say something on air or see something, and I've been doing this long enough now where often I'll change it in my head. I'll see it come across on the prompter and I'm like, ooh, that's not right. Or I feel like that's not sensitive. We're not saying it the right way. And I can change it on the fly, but then I'll always have a conversation with our producers afterward to make sure that they can make that change again and see where they can improve. So leadership skills are essential. And then the trainable skills are, obviously everybody is an MMJ these days, a multimedia journalist. So, I mean, nowadays you can shoot a story on your own iPhone, but you should still know how to operate one of our cameras. And very often you're editing. So the current system we're using is Premiere Editing, which you may be familiar with. It's kind of like Final Cut Pro. So there are those types of skills that are important too. I mean, when I first started out years ago, I've been doing this for 27 years. I was the reporter and the shooter and the editor. And back then, I had no one with me and I was shooting my own stand-ups. I used to bring a light stand and measure it up to my height and then put it in front of the camera. And that's how I would shoot my own stand-ups. But being as versatile as you can, wearing as many hats as you can is really important. So I would definitely say you need both sets of skills.
So what are some challenges that you face in your current position?
I would say one of the big ones has been lately with how tough the news has been. I can remember with the pandemic every day saying, in New York alone, 800 people died today, 900 people died today. You're reading it over and over again. I'm on for such a long period of time. You're saying stories again and again and again. One of my challenges, or at least one of the things that I'm always working on, is I don't ever want to become desensitized. As much as this has been such a huge impact for people, when you're talking about things so much, you don't want to lose that sense of compassion. And so that, I don't know if it's so much a challenge, but it's something that I guess it is a challenge that I just want to say to myself, I don't ever want people to think that I am not remembering the impact here and being sincere. So that's a big one. Then the harder stories, you know, can have an impact on you personally. You want to make sure that A, you're sensitive enough, but B, you're not getting too involved that you can't do your job and you're like breaking down. So there's that balance. So I would say that's one of the challenges. And during this election cycle, it was tough. I do feel like some of the lines are blurring a little bit. I feel like some of the journalists were tweeting things that took a side, and I really feel it's not our job to take a side, but to keep people informed and present all sides, let them make the decision. That has been a big challenge there. You know, you may have heard, you know, with Twitter, there was definitely some articles blocked, and, you know, the New York Post was blocked for a while about an election story. And I think we have to be very careful of censorship and make sure that that doesn't happen, because I think that's a slippery slope. So this election cycle was tougher than most, and that was challenging too. And all I ask of our producers, our writers, and everyone is that they make sure they're attributing and they're being fair and they're representing all sides.
What advice would you have for a student interested in going into this profession, such as, like, is freelance like a viable option? Can you make as much as you were to make in like a studio setting, or would you make more in freelance?
Freelance is something that you definitely get into, but you usually don't get into those jobs until you're higher up on the ladder. I think one of the biggest things is just getting your feet wet, and don't be afraid to take something. Like for me, my first offer was for an assignment editor, and I wanted to be a reporter. And I remember reaching out to my professor and saying, I don't know, you know, maybe this is a way in, but, you know, I really want to report. And without a doubt, my professor is like, get in the door. It's going to give you great experience. And that was at News 12 Long Island. So the sooner you can get out there, and, you know, whether you're in the studio or, you know, whether you're in the newsroom and you're helping, you know, assign stories, that's one of the greatest ways that you get that experience. And then internships and networking. Every time I had an internship, I would meet someone and I'd stay in touch with them. And I'll never forget when I was at NBC News, I had someone that I worked with who was like, listen, stay in touch with me. And that woman ended up helping me get a job later on. So, you know, those things really matter. I have friends who moved on to New York and to Boston, and they freelance now, and they're able to make that money on just a couple of days freelance. But it is hard at the beginning, and you have to love what you do, because the money isn't there at the beginning. A lot of people think, oh, it's all glamour. You're working hard. You're working long days. You're working holidays. So you really have to have a love for the job and wanting to help people and want to inform people, because it may take time before you can get up that ladder and make more of the money you're hoping to make.
Were there any like classes you took in middle school or high school that connect to your job now? And were there any like out of school programs that were very helpful to get to where you are?
I would say in school, I mean, certainly English, you know, writing and grammar, but even social studies. I mean, the sense of current events that you have to have. And so often stories we cover now still relate to events of the past. So, you know, just having that sense, having that curiosity, being interested, you know, those subjects were important. But here's the thing: when you're a journalist, you're a student of life. It's one of the other things I love about it. You're learning something new every day. I am not at the point where I go in and go, oh, I did this story a million times. There's always some new aspect or something new I'm learning, and that's one of the most fascinating things about the job. And by the same token, pretty much a lot of the different courses I had, you know, growing up, kind of help in a way, because when I'm doing medical stories, you know, it may remind me of something I did in science, or, you know, there's always a tie-in. So as a student of life, you're pulling from a lot of different areas. And in clubs, I think it was more just, you know, leadership skills that helps me. I'm trying to remember names of specific clubs I was in right now, and it's escaping me. But any place, or even in the honor society, where, you know, you're able to take kind of that lead role, has helped me tremendously now to lead the group where I am currently.
Well, Ms. Arangio, we are coming to the end of our time today. Do you have any other comments you'd like to share with our students who would watch this, or anything we didn't get to that you'd like to share?
Just, you know, if you can't do what you love, I feel so fortunate that I have a job that I love. You know, you do need to work hard, make those contacts however you can. And, you know, everyone in a way is their own, you know, photographer these days with what we have at our disposal now. So you can really, you know, even start out if you have an interest in making your own stories, even in high school. So, you know, just start now. And if you have an interest in it, and, you know, if as long as you're doing what you love, you'll be happy.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time. Your energy and passion for what you do comes through. So that's inspiring for our students. So thank you.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. Good luck to you.